This is episode 110 of The Changed Physician. Today, thank you for joining us. I'm Melissa Cady, the Challenge Doctor, with my amazing co-host, Dr. Kevin Cuccaro. And this is our episode 110, where we wanted to talk about the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. And let me just start by saying there was a quote that I kind of started this whole process of discussion, and it was by Abraham Maslow. And the quote goes, "You will either step forward into growth or you will step backward into safety." And my co-host really liked that quote. So how are you today?
I'm well. How are you? The
I'm
incredible
wonderful.
Dr. Cady. Incredible Dr. Cady.
Incredible.
Incredible. And yeah, you're increased your
It's an able, not
ableness
an
and
able.
incredding. I don't even know what that is. But no, I like that quote because it's obviously very relevant to the goals of the podcast.
Right.
And this talks about certainty and uncertainty, about growth versus comfort. And the other part that it reminded me of is some recent reading that I've been doing, actually from a Maslow prodigy. So Scott Kaufman, who wrote Transcend, which in this particular book is all about how we've gotten wrong many things when it comes to Maslow's hierarchy, where we view it in a pyramid is actually not so much of a pyramid. And in particular, there was a quote in here, or there was a passage about neuroticism, need for closure, and need for certainty. So if you can kind of think, there are certain people, and I would put myself in this camp, that when we are in changing situations, that tends to become very distressful. And specifically, if you have high levels of neuroticism, which is neuroticism is one of the big 5 personality traits that's associated with things like kind of the negative voice in your head, that you tend to see things more negative, you predict more negative events occur. There's some unhealthful benefits associated with as well. But if you have high trait neuroticism and you're exposed to uncertain feedback, so we are exposed to things that we don't know what the result is going to be, compared to negative feedback, so feedback that we know is not positive, the nervous system actually delivers an outsized emotion-laden response. Or as the psychologist Jacob Hirsch and Michael Inslish note, that people who score high in neuroticism prefer the devil they know over the devil they do not know. And this is so important to change, because you think about these situations, the only place that you are actually going to grow, you don't grow from things that you've done over and over again. If you play the same song on a musical instrument repeatedly over time, you can now play that same song repeatedly, the same over time, but it doesn't mean you're going to be able to play something else. You have to be able to challenge yourself. And if you're recognizing, and what I found was remarkable with a lot of the work that we've done outside of the Changed Physician on things like pain, is there are people, it starts to make sense of people who start getting trapped in negative relationships and circumstances. And you go, why are you tolerating this? Well, if you have high trait neuroticism, or you have this this traumatic exposure and things, when you are in that sense of this is known, it may be negative, may be abusive in many ways, shapes, or form, but it's known abuse, it's known negativity, this is something that you're expecting to occur, and it reinforces those predictions in the brain. Versus being in a scenario where you have uncertain feedback, whether it's positive or negative, it's just so prominent. And if it's you, if you're finding yourself in a situation where you're repeating these things over and over and over again, the point being, check and see whether these negative interactions, negative experiences, negative environments you may find yourself in are because those are where you're comfortable with. It provides a sense of certainty, because you know the feedback that you are getting, and we're talking about all sorts of different stimulus here, both the words, actions, behaviors, etc., reinforces what you expect to occur, which is negative. And if we don't recognize this, or we don't get comfortable feeling uncomfortable, we're never going to be able to grow. And from the spectrum of neuroticism, maybe if you're high on neuroticism on one side, where now we're getting stabbed in abusive relationships and traumas, or repeating things over and over and over again because we're getting that negative feedback, versus even when we're more trying to, maybe we don't view ourselves as highly neurotic, but we're not challenging ourselves with a environments, people, challenging ideas, challenging behaviors, doing new activities, we're not going to be doing the growth, or certainly, thinking about time, we're not going to be eating those orange slices as much as we can and growing those scenarios in the future, because we're not willing to change. Instead, we're choosing to stay with the devil we know, because we're scared of the devil we don't know, because we don't even recognize whether or not they're going to be a devil. That uncertainty then keeps us kind of trapped. That fear of the unknown keeps us trapped in a current system of whether, again, where you're living, who you're with, what you're doing, can very easily keep you stuck if you're satisfied or fearful of the unknown more than you are miserable with the known.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting concept, because if you are willing to, if you just acknowledge and understand that as a human, change, it does create this little dissonance inside of you where it's uncomfortable, or it feels like something's different or off. But if how you're interpreting that's very interesting, because I think there's some people that and this can go in so many directions, especially if someone's had trauma and all these other things. But if your interpretation of uncertainty is negative, then you would suspect that would be kind of a fear type of sensation that you're having. But then there's some people that I think have equated this uncertainty as excitement, as this sense of an anticipation, or just curious for something different. Like it's how your brain is defining that as a positive or negative sensation. Physiologically, even, feeling the changes going on. Some people, talk about, and in some of this research, that I've seen in the past, where you have to process those emotions, let them flow through you versus pushing them away and building the anxiety and that fearful kind of patterning where you're the avoidance. We see this in kind of pain world, and this whole fear avoidance and not wanting to move because they associate pain as being like that it's harming them, even though that's not this is not what it means. It's not how pain works. There's a lot of things that are going on. But anyway, it makes me think of even children, when parents are trying to almost protect their child from trying something new. Like they're ordering for them, they're not letting them do things for themselves. Like they're not making their daily experience of just a little discomfort, that's okay, that it's just part of being a human that's progressing in life and personally developing. And I feel like you kind of, trauma is one thing, but if you suppress the opportunities for children that are developing so quickly to challenge themselves with these little, it doesn't seem like a big deal. It's easy for mom. She's always ordered food, like all these things, or always cleaning for them. Like there's so much you can do to help even build this resilience in a child, so that they don't build the sense of fear, because they don't really practice it on a daily basis. So anyway, those are my thoughts.
We're going to transition into resiliency, and resiliency strategies.
It's all tied together.
Well, and it does, because one definitely leads together. You can't become resilient without change, and you can't grow that change without recognizing that uncertainty role. And so stepping back to what you were talking about with stress, right? Mm-hmm. So we know uncertainty is a stressor. Mm-hmm. When you are in an uncertain situation and you recognize it's an uncertain situation, that's the key. You perceive it as being an uncertain situation where you're now, oh, wait, I'm in a new environment. These are new people, et cetera. That is by and in of itself, and the way the brain recognizes it as a stressor. Mm-hmm. What changes though is the frame. So we have two different types of stress. We have eustress and we have distress. Distress is high threat perception based stress. The physiology is subtly different. And then we have eustress, which is high challenge based stress. Mm-hmm. And there are individuals, high neuroticism, and some of us who maybe don't handle uncertainty as well, that may be more distressful, mm-hmm. versus the challenge seekers, or we will call them the risk seekers, who find that as more of a eustress, and they're pursuing it because it gives them whatever. We're going to call it more of a dopamine and endogenous opioid release associated with it, reinforces it, the thrill-seeking behavior. But it's just really, really interesting to me, because some people will say, well, uncertainty is negative or anxiety is positive. And actually, the answer is both. Uncertainty is an emotion amplifier. What matters is the frame. And like you were saying, if we are framing things to our children or ourselves or our spouse or our parents or whatever, that new is dangerous, then when we are into an uncertain situation, which by definition is new, now we're going in with this preframe that this is dangerous, this is threat. So we're going to have an emotionally amplified negative experience. So what do we do around that? Well, that's the reframe, the awareness that there is both a positive or a potential negative associated with it, but to change that perception to, instead of saying, well, this is bad, all this bad stuff is going to occur. Well, this is new. What good things could come from that? And so that, I mean, it is just interesting to me when we start looking at, this can be so challenging because the devil is the devil, right? We can tolerate a lot in the human condition if it's certain. Like I'm thinking about people listeners who may be stuck in a job, and it's, if it's extraordinarily dissatisfactory and they're like, I hate this, I need to leave, that may be actually better than being in a scenario, well, this is okay.
Yeah.
Because you're less likely to change.
Yeah. And you made me think of whether it's relationships or in a job, and I've had it happen on both accounts, but if it's insidiously changing, like initially it was great, insidiously it's changing, it's almost undetectable. And it's over time shifting in the wrong direction. It's kind of like that plane that takes off, it's 1 degree off from its actual destination. That 1 degree off over hours is going to be projecting in a much worse location for your essential destination. But it's the same thing. It's like somehow we can, because of the brain and how it's adaptable, it can adapt to these small changes over time almost without perceiving it. And then, but if for some reason the job that changed over 9 years, it presented itself the way it is in 9 years, the first day, you'd be like, hell no, I don't want this. If you could see it and understand it from the get-go, this is not what I want. But once you're in it and it changes slowly, sometimes it's hard for you to get out of it because you're so acclimated to it, and changing in itself is distressing because you'll find other reasons to stay in it, whether it's the money or whatever. So anyway,
the devil you knew or know grew with you, basically, right?
Yeah.
So
more powerful.
And I think that's the danger, is small change is difficult to see. So and if those small changes occur over time, it's like the frog in the boiling pot, which apparently doesn't really happen. I looked it up. Frogs will actually jump out of the water, but they say if you put the frog in the cold water and then you slowly heat it up, it cooks the frog because they don't notice any difference. Doesn't actually happen with frogs, but I think it happens with humans all the time, just like you're saying, is that we have these small unrecognizable changes or unaware of these small pieces of change that over time start to grow, such that now the devil that the certainty associated with the devil may not even be the initial devil that you partnered with in the beginning, whether this is a job, person, whoever, but you're not recognizing the degree of change associated with that. Now, I find that because then I'm thinking, well, what do you do to combat that? Like, how do you, because there's two factors. Like we want to make sure that we're recognizing the risks associated with when there has been lack of, we'll say, small doses of uncertainty, so much so that they're not even a sense of uncertainty, but now we've changed the scenario. What do we do in there? And I think that has to do with regular intentional exercises of kind of taking a moment to reflect on who you are and if this is what you want to be. I think that the other part about this is to use that same strategy that we're talking about in a negative connotation in a positive way would be, if you are scared of change, then how do you scale back in such a way that you're doing small actions that are just slightly different than what you were doing, but over a long time start to compound. And we'll talk a couple little challenge exercises at the end of this episode, but it's a long way to say is that small change is harder to see and anticipate when they occur over time versus big change. And a lot of the times, if there's a vague sense of unease in whatever it is your practice or life or it is at this moment in time, is to then take a couple moments, probably longer than a moment, to intentionally reflect on perhaps where you started and where you are now, and are the things in your life where you want them to be, so that now we can actually see be more appreciative of maybe maybe the devil's changed. maybe the devil's much bigger than you ever anticipated.
Exactly. And I just wrote down 4 things thinking about what is it about those small changes over time that somehow we don't recognize. But I think there's a part of, and I think that rationalization is sometimes part of it. We can excuse little things. It's not overtly big, or whether it's relationships or job scenarios and whatnot. But we keep holding on to the same pattern as being in the same job or the same relationship in the same situation. The longer you hold on to it, the harder it is to get rid of it. Even when they say you hire someone that's not good for the company, you should fire fast, because there's a lot of reasons that it can be difficult to, get rid of them later, and don't want to waste your time with someone who's not adding to your business in a positive way. But it made me think about, like you said, reflect on who you are, yourself, what your boundaries are. If you don't have a sense of what matters to you, then you kind of just go with the flow versus like being intentional on what you want and what you don't want. I'm not saying being so rigid that you're not adaptable to things that are going to change over time and whatnot, but some real basic key concepts on what kind of environment do you want to work in? Is this toxic? Is this, is this engaging? Is this something you feel like you have meaning in? Are the relationships are these, there's just so many things that you have to lay out for yourself within yourself, because the devil will get bigger if you're in the wrong environment.
Well, and as we said, that may not be a bad thing. Are you comfortable in a situation that is miserable simply because it's known? And the fear of the unknown is more disconcerting than the comfort of misery. And there's a quote on there, I just can't remember what it is exactly. Or is it when the scenarios change? Because the remarkable thing about the human being, brain and body, is how adaptable we are. So these small little changes over time, we will adapt to quite easily. In the same way, though, as if you change us and put us in a more traumatic situation, when it's not so much that is completely over, we're talking like PTSD kind of scenarios or things like that, we can adapt pretty well. Look at COVID.
Yeah.
And where we were all suddenly put into a situation where there was mass amounts of unknown and uncertainty, and it was uncomfortable, and wailing of gnashing of teeth and things. But many of us, by the tail end, before we started doing widespread vaccination, had moved into a role where we've adapted to this new normal. And so it reinforces, though, one of the capabilities that if you are wanting to change, the only way to successfully change is to increase your ability to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, to increase, they'll call them fear setting exercises, to put yourself in challenging situations, to be in many ways intentional about putting yourself into situations that may be new, uncertain, provide and amplify kind of that stress response in a positive or negative way, because of the uncertainty associated with it.
Yeah. And if you can frame it into a positive slant, that's I think a critical component and we're not always going to be masters. And when we try these challenges, doesn't mean we're, it's always going to go as well as we hope or whatnot, but it's being okay with just whatever happens. And then you adapt to that and move on. But, even going out and be my own business owner in anesthesia, that was the most recent, most radical just shift that I've had to feel lately. The pandemic was one thing, but this was real personal in my own life, and so no one else was experiencing what I was experiencing. It was all in my head, but the initial impact of needing to make that change was hard, and it was very clear, but quickly I had to reframe it into, this is a great opportunity. Luckily, I have an amazing supportive husband who saw it that way as well. And so, that's great to surround yourself with people that also support that kind of growth mindset and can enable you to be a better person for it. So, challenging, I know you had a good idea for challenging everyone out there. I know my husband's good at, he's gotten good at challenging himself with uncomfortable, I deem uncomfortable conversations.
Maybe you need to too, is you should take his, and we should detail what the strategy is. You should practice it yourself. I think that's a good challenge exercise for because you have a model that has demonstrated it, that is going to be supportive.
Yes.
And so what's the exercise? Tell what does your husband do?
So let me just say, you have to be a persuasive person and have strong belief in yourself and not waver and second guess yourself.
Well, I'm going to challenge you on that, right?
Okay.
You don't have to be a persuasive person, and you don't have to have a strong belief in yourself in order to do what you're going to say. What you do have to do is be comfortable with uncertainty and being comfortable with someone saying no. So then I'm gonna put that out there.
Maybe he's more effective, even if I do the challenge. I would say his success rate might be higher, but we'll see.
Well, okay. I'm gonna reframe that again.
Go ahead.
Is the purpose of the exercise to get the outcome or result, or is the purpose of the exercise to increase your comfort? Because
the latter is your intention. I'm thinking I want the result.
I know you're thinking about the outcome. So let everybody know what the exercise is.
Well, so at our one of our grocery stores, they make homemade guacamole, and that it is 50% off usually. It goes pretty fast once it's labeled, because it's a no-brainer for people to grab a 50% off guacamole when it looks good and not brown. But if you happen to go late at night, my husband
so it gets 50% off when it's expiring, right?
When it's expiring. So the day before it expires, so close to midnight, we do our late night shopping when there's fewer shoppers around. It's just easier now with the pandemic too, especially. But he'll find the ones that are going to expire at midnight, and he'll take them to the register, and he'll say, this is 50% off. And of course, they could look at them with a sideways bent head. And then he's like, oh, these expire at midnight. They go 50% off with pure conviction. And they go ahead and give him the 50% off. And I always feel uncomfortable, like demanding that of people, because, there's a little uncertainty on their end too. So I don't know. I just have always let him be the one doing it because he's a master at it.
Well, and he's got practice, right? So that is no longer an uncertainty for him because he's got practice doing that exercise. So the exercise for you would be, and you don't have to necessarily, and this is the part that, because the purpose of these exercises, folks, is not necessarily the outcome that you achieve, that you actually get it. Because if we frame it in an outcome-based manner, then if you don't get it, then we get all that sense of failure. Less than. Really, the whole point of it is just doing it, right?
Right.
And so if you're not comfortable saying this is 50% off, even though, because it's not midnight yet, you can say, I would just approach it like this. What would be a little more comfortable, and to support that part of the exercises, this expires at midnight tonight. Would you make it 50% off now?
Yeah.
And so because for most humans, maybe not Corey, but most humans, that's an uncomfortable interaction, right?
Yeah.
So we're increasing a sense of asking someone to do something else that is uncertain, that may be stretching the rules, although not much, because it makes more sense to them. Hey, if I can sell it now or not.
Yeah.
And that would be an easy exercise to do. If you want to make it a little more challenging, you would just say, this expires at midnight tonight. Can I get 50% off? And then just leave it there. And I would be shocked if you didn't get more than a few people giving you 50% off your guacamole.
Yeah. Well, I guess it depends too on that person. Like,
On that person.
yeah, I don't know. Maybe a female asking a male that likes females might do, get a better success rate than.
But it's not about the success rate, right? It's not about the success
No,
rate.
I know. I'm just saying for outcome, if I really wanted to make sure I walked out with guacamole.
Yeah. So I'm going to give everybody else another exercise. This is one that I haven't done in a long time. I need to do this, I guess, because it has been a long time, and it sounds silly. I mean, it just sounds so silly, but try it. In fact, this is my challenge to the listeners. I want you to try this exercise. And then I want you to email me directly at drkevin@thechangedphysician.com and tell me what your experience is with it. And especially if you're a listener going, well, this is so simple, blah, blah, blah. I want you to do it because it sounds simple, and it was extraordinarily challenging. And this is something called the coffee challenge. And I learned it from a guy named Noah Kagan, who's like an amazing marketer. He's got his own YouTube channel, and just a really interesting guy. And recognizing the fear that we have with doing uncomfortable things. This particular exercise is one where you're just going to get comfortable asking somebody for something with no expectation of what it may be. So when you go and buy yourself a cup of coffee, and if you don't buy coffee, whatever it is that you're purchasing at the store, your sandwich or whatever, when they give it to you, say, oh, thank you so much. Could I'd like to buy this. Can I have 50% off? Or not 50, sorry, 50, not 50%, 10%, not 50%. I guess you can do that. That'd be a big challenge, but 10% off, right? It's a small amount. Most of us would think that is negligible. That it really doesn't matter what the response may be, but it is really, really, really uncomfortable. And if you want to make it less uncomfortable, you can say, can I have 10% off because, because of something. That will make it less uncomfortable. If you want to put the exercise in such a way that will kind of maximize the uncomfortableness, you don't provide an explanation because you're going to want to say, may I have 10% off? And then that's it. And then if they say, well, why? Then you can add an explanation, but just say, hey, can I get 10% off my coffee today? That's it. And it sounds silly, but doing these little small daily challenges in your life, and you will start feeling comfortable asking for things, presenting yourself into an uncertain situation, and being a little bit, recognizing that, uncertainty is okay, right? It can actually be a positive thing if we frame it as a game.
Exactly. Yeah, you just made me think of something else I had done lately. We'll save for another time. Well, for those, did you want to take us out, since I think I brought us in?
You can take us out. You can take us out.
Well, on that challenge note, I'm Melissa Katie, the Challenge Doctor, and today I'm with my co-host, Dr. Kevin Cuccaro, who's my challenge co-host, to have you deal with the devil and hopefully find some more comfort with things that tend to be uncomfortable for us as human beings. So if you don't know what the Change Physician is all about, you can go to thechangedphysician.com and join us as a physician or a physician ally, and make sure to join us or listen in on the podcast venues. Oh, and I didn't mention, of course, the YouTube. You can see us in the video versus just audio, and we'll be happy to take comments there and keep a dialogue going. But remember to send Dr. Kevin at thechangedphysician.com anyone who's taken on this challenge and what you felt, what you experienced. We'd love to hear about it. Until next time, take care.
Take care, folks.